G'day viewers and welcome back to the Australian Property Scout YouTube channel. Now today guys, what I really wanted to dissect was the Australian property market predictions and market outlook for 2024. Now I've got a few stats here I kind of want to run through, and then I want to run through the big drivers of where we're seeing the market heading this year and the things that are really going to push the market for some areas to see massive growth and for other areas to potentially stagnate and not perform. Now if we look at the past performance back into 2023 as a bit of a recap guys, housing values across the country rose 8.1% in 2023, and it ranged in a spread from Victoria actually falling by a 1.6% across the state of Victoria to a 15.2% surge in Perth. So different areas obviously performing at different levels. You've got some areas doing next to nothing, as you can see, but even within that, there might have been some areas that have done okay in the lower in those lower areas that fell, and then other areas in Perth surging 15.2%. I personally know areas in Perth that did over 25 to 30%. So obviously these are always medians and they're always metrics to take with a pinch of salt. But it's very interesting to see from a macro perspective of where those markets moved and where has performed. 15% growth in a capital city is a pretty big number. Now, some of your other smaller capital cities did quite well as well, which is very interesting to see. When we look at across the country at the moment as well, the markets do seem to be performing quite well. And their market's coming from a more affordable base. If we look at the direct correlation at the moment between how high interest rates are, and the fact that some markets are still growing, the very obvious, pain point we're seeing out there is the more expensive markets that have been through a lot of growth over the last 5 to 10 years aren't growing at the same rate. A lot of them, as we've seen here, are kind of easing off a little bit as well right now. Strong population growth and a tight housing supply is probably keeping them from falling, but they're not going to outperform or shoot the lights out, in our opinions, anytime soon. Your more affordable capital cities and your other strong regional centers that have big drivers for capital growth as well, as we're seeing, they are seeing some very strong growth, as we saw in 2023. It'd be very interesting to dissect and to have a look at how these things perform in 2024. Now, the few key points that I really wanted to dissect, in today's video as well, is inflation, obviously being, a word that's very, very hot on the lips of a lot of people out there, especially investors, over the last few years. Now, in particular, 2022, 2023, inflation was a massive thing out there, a massive driver of what pushed interest rates to the level that they went at. But a very interesting thing to note was over the December quarter, so over the Christmas period, which is typically the most expensive and most free spending time of the year that there is out there, the inflation numbers actually fell by a decent amount and came down to a 4.1%, which is the lowest rate that has been in, I think it was around about 2.5 years now. We're potentially going on 3 years now, 4.1%. And we're not that far off now of the 3%. Obviously, that's the target band of the 2 to 3% of the RBA. Now, the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia, obviously want it within that because it's a very manageable inflation rate. It means the economy is growing, but not at a silly level, and so being down to 4.1% is a good indicator that we're getting back nice and close to that target band so that interest rates can hopefully start being eased in the next 6, 12, 18 months as well. They obviously peaked at the final end in December 2022 at 7.8%. So it's a pretty massive drop. We're almost down, almost half, we're almost half that number to come down to the 4.1% in a 2-year window. As much as the people didn't like the RBA with their blunt tool, their blunt instrument, they did bring pain to the market that they needed to, and they have got this thing almost fully under control. It's going to be very interesting to watch how that plays out. Big Lukey Chewson from the Scouting Australia podcast, the APS team, he's got the bold prediction that inflation is going to be back within the target band by mid-year, by the end of financial year of 2024. I think it's going to be a little bit longer. I think it could be a quarter beyond that, maybe 2, before it does properly come back in. Inflation's a bit of a sticky point at the moment. I think it will take a bit longer than in the next 2 quarters, personally. Now, guys, moving on and talking about interest rates as well. When interest rates start getting cut and when that does come into effect is an interesting point and something interesting to dissect. I personally believe we may see 1 interest rate cut by the end of the year. It could be 2. It really is going to depend on what happens with those inflation numbers and where that goes. If inflation does stay a little bit high and stays a little bit sticky, then I don't believe they're going to cut it. I think the RBA will wait until it is necessary. They don't want it to run away again. But if it does start to come back, I do think that we will see some cuts. Next year in particular, 2025, first quarter, second quarter of 2025, I do think we are going to see some decent rate cuts, and that is going to obviously fuel a lot of demand back into the marketplace with people who've been sitting on the sidelines or waiting, or now have affordability and serviceability to also get back in the marketplace. This year, even with interest rates in the equation, this year in particular, I think is going to be a year driven by affordability. With interest rates where they are, affordability remains a key factor out there in the marketplace that will keep those affordable locations. Yields will remain, cash flows will remain decent. More affordable market, lower it is. A lot of the time you have a higher yield, higher return on that as well. More investors will target that, and more first home buyers and potentially downsizers will also be able to afford to get into that marketplace. So my prediction is obviously going to be that affordable markets are going to lead the way once again in 2024, the same as they did in 2023. Your main key growth drivers in 2024, from my opinion and my site, population growth is going to be your biggest driver of a housing issue, a serious housing crisis that we're going to be seeing. You throw on top of that the fact that building approvals are falling to all-time lows. We're not seeing enough of this stuff coming out. Not seeing enough builds coming through, builds coming out, builds being approved in general. That's going to create a problem in itself. When you then throw the fuel on the fire, being population growth at the level that it's at and being pushed as hard as it is, that is going to create a serious issue. That is probably predominantly going to push rental prices to a serious, we're already in a bit of a rental crisis. We are in a rental crisis. It is going to keep putting fuel on the fire of that rental crisis. What we're going to see is a lot of people shifting from that rental side, especially Australians who've been here for a while, to then move in and try and buy. Again, keeping heat on the purchasing market because the population incoming, when people move here, they can't buy a house for the first 2 years typically. They need to wait for permanent residency. So they move into the rental market and make that really, really hot. Until that eases off, I think that's going to stay very, very strong. So in 2024, I think that's going to be a massive driver. Undersupply, once again, not enough stock coming to market, not enough homes being built, both from a rental and a sales perspective. Undersupply is going to be a big driver of both rental growth and price growth in 2024. And probably my biggest view on where the market is really going to be pushed in 2024 in particular, with interest rates remaining quite high, is going to be affordability. Regardless of what happens with interest rate movements, I believe there are markets out there this year that will produce 20, 25, 30% plus growth. And if you really want to know, obviously, where that sort of stock is and where you're going to get that sort of growth as well, affordability and affordable markets are going to be the key driver, key place to look to be able to secure those sort of growth rates as well. But a lot of that is going to come down to selecting those areas very critically. So finding the little maybe suburbs that are more affordable and maybe haven't had as much growth yet in markets that show an overall affordable position as well. It's going to be very, very carefully selecting markets to achieve growth that high. But I do believe there's a lot of markets out there that are even definitely going to produce double digits into that 20% plus. It's going to take very finite sort of care and selection to be able to get the upper end of that growth stick. Now, guys, that's pretty much it. From a market prediction, I do believe the market momentum is going to continue. 2024 is still going to be a strong year for plenty of markets out there in Australia. There are going to be markets that suffer and are slower, potentially don't see the growth out there in the marketplace, but we are going to see some good, strong growth in plenty of locations in 2024, and it's going to be a great year to set yourself up for the growth that I'm very bullish on coming also in 2025. So guys, that's pretty much it from me. That's for my market predictions for 2024, where I see the market pushing, where I see the market heading, what is going to be pushing the market this year. I hope you took some great value out of it. If you did, make sure you hit the subscribe button and send it on to anyone else. If there's anything you want to comment and let us know what your thoughts are on this market as well, any thoughts on the video, make sure to comment, and make sure, guys, if you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button. Thank you.